over the next 20 minutes, my hope, my aspiration here is that we can have a thought-provoking discussion that gives you some data points. And when you get back to the office, or home office, let's be honest, you can think about, talk to the team about some of the gaps or potential opportunities in your application development, your adoption of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, and how to secure those applications you're building, especially cloud-native applications. So we'll talk about some macro trends in 2022 that are affecting all of us in this regard. And then we'll talk a little bit about the threat landscape, ever-evolving threat landscape that, feels like, candidly, how do you keep up with it? And then we'll talk about a few things we can do with an approach we've taken, and then we'll conclude. So 20 minutes, I'll tee you up for the ZTNA discussion coming up. All of you should be seeing these on your top of mind, right? The migration to the cloud, this big migration to the cloud, turned out to be, hey, I still have some applications that are going to reside in my data center, albeit it may be a data set that's going to reside in my data center. But the front end is going to reside in the cloud because it's easy. It scales easier, right? It's lightweight from my perspective as a user. So we go to a hybrid infrastructure, and that creates an opportunity for threat actors to find ways in as your data in motion is moving between your traditional data centers or multi-cloud, right? Because most of us have assets in multiple cloud providers. And then the distributed applications that I just talked about, right? It's not just the hybrid cloud, the multi-cloud. It's also leveraging CDN suppliers, right? To take your content, deliver it faster to the user, closer to the user, right? We all take advantage of those services. And then you have the APIs for all of those microservices architecture vendors that you're using in your SaaS deployments, your infrastructure as a service deployments, platform as a service deployments, right? All the different ways you're leveraging the cloud, the use cases that you're putting in the cloud. So you need to think about, how do I secure those APIs to make sure that only those partners or other applications I want to have access to that REST API are getting access, right? How do I secure those? And then, of course, the factoring, the different ways we're applying machine learning algorithms to make the experience, the end user experience for the application better, faster, right? A greater experience. Now, on top of that, we have the consumption diversification, because we in the industry, on the vendor side, the public cloud providers, we're constantly evolving. We're evolving our licensing, subscription, how you consume. And we used to talk about, you have a pretty good division, black and white division of capital expenditures and operational expenditures, and that's gone out the window, right? Now the consumption models are clearly migrating, and that opens you up to, how do I continue to keep up with the pace of innovation, to take advantage of some of this innovation, and get my company to give me the budget to do that when it keeps moving, right? How do we do that? That's actually one of the biggest blockers we have as a vendor for customers to move towards a new technology. So let's talk a little bit about how some of those macro trends are affecting the threat landscape, this ever-evolving threat landscape. First of all, everybody understands, and you should appreciate, that the attack surface is ever expanding. Why? We did a wholesale shift for all of your employees to a home office. Did you have the infrastructure to have a device that's looking at their local area network at their home, right? Looking for threats, protecting that corporate provided laptop that you gave them on their home SSID, or did you provide them a device that only allows them access to your corporate network, right? But then they turn on split tunneling, and they allow for attack vector into their device before they come into your corporate network, right? Lots of ways we could mitigate that, but ultimately, it's that expanded attack surface we need to be concerned with. I already talked about this, the growth of multi-cloud. So the concept of I have workflows, data assets that reside in GCP, OCI, AWS, Azure, right? I probably talk to, in a given year, 100 to 150 customers at the executive level, and we discuss ways that their business is trying to transform, but some of the blockers they have because they're looking for that perfect technology to help them leapfrog. And this discussion, if you take anything away from this discussion, it's that I'm sorry to say, there's no perfect technology that's going to take that leapfrog approach for you as a consumer. But it's not the right question. What you should be asking is, how can I enable my workforce to be smarter about the threat landscape so that we can mitigate some of these problems before they reach the network, right? So we'll talk about that. I just talked about it, shortage of skilled professionals. We're all dealing with, I think, Fortinet, we have 480 open positions in the US alone, right? And as a hiring manager, I can tell you it's hard to find people right now. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But mainly, this ever-evolving technology landscape we work and live in, it's hard to find qualified candidates that have the right experience when you're trying to get to the future state, right? So how do we mitigate that? And then the growing complexity we've talked about, multiple fronts. It's only going to get more complex. So how do we simplify, especially on the operational side? So you have these tools, and each one has a specific use case. How do you get an operational stack that your team can manage, adds, moves, changes, and make sure it's secure across your enterprise to give you greater visibility and control? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, on top of that, we have new attack surfaces. And we talked a little bit about the APIs. Have you thought about the cloud interconnect? We talked about multi-cloud, but when you have those interconnects where you have a data set in one cloud provider and a data set in another cloud provider, and they're interchanging information in the application process, how do you safeguard that? Right? A lot of things to think about. Containers, microservices architecture. So a lot of my peers and us thought that microservices, easy, we're going to take a VM, we're going to containerize it, we're going to put it in there, and we're going to allow you to have the same architecture you had in your traditional data centers. But it doesn't work, right? Because it slows down your agility in the application in a microservices architecture. So then you get to, okay, I'm going to put a security hub in front of that in the cloud, right? But that's got some holes. So again, this is just us going over the threat landscape. We'll talk about, in conclusion, we'll talk about a few opportunities I think we all have to mitigate some of these risks. But it's definitely something you need to be thinking about. And then, of course, I already talked about the orchestration systems. Simplification is the mitigation, right? When you've got too many panels that your operators have to look at on a daily basis, there's going to be alert fatigue. You're going to miss something. There's going to be something that was there, that was evident, that something is not right. And they missed it because they have too many panels that they're looking at. And with the skilled shortage, that's an exacerbated problem. And now we have, on top of that, these new challenges because we have the visibility across multiple cloud platforms. And then we talked a little bit about human error, but ultimately, I want to get to the next slide because this is a great data point. Gartner actually says by 2025, 99% of cloud security failures will be the result of human error. I know all of you are feeling it because every conversation I have, I'm asked by executives and customers, where do I find the right skill set? Help me understand, where are these people? How do I find them? How do I get my existing staff smarter about the technologies and the solutions we're going to leverage to get to that next level, to take our company into the future? So how do we mitigate all this? Okay, I talked about a few things. It sounds like everybody's saying this, but what's the answer? Eric, give me an answer. I hear you. It's a tough problem, but there are people that are thinking about this all the time, right? I told you in a given year, I talked to 150 customers at the executive level about their business, about their leveraging technology, how are they mitigating these security concerns. And that gives me a pretty good lens to a broader view of what you're all dealing with, right? So let's talk about it. This is the thought-provoking part of the discussion. I implore all of you to take a thoughtful approach that includes best practices if you're not doing DevOps and DevSecOps, right? The agility that provides while still maintaining a posture of security, you need to be looking at it, right? Find somebody that's been doing it, bring them on, and allow them to train your team, right? Training and augmentation. So there are companies, plenty of companies out there, partners of ours, that will help you with the implementation so your people can stand over their shoulder and learn during the implementation, get you up to speed, and then your team is smart enough to iterate as needed after the deployment, right? Augmentation, absolutely, leverage it. But I'd also say training, and training isn't just for your smart hands, your people that are actually touching this equipment that you're leveraging, or software that you're leveraging to mitigate security. It's every user on your network. Every user on your network needs training. They need to understand where those threats are coming from and what they can do as a user to not click on the pop-up, to not click on a link in a smishing campaign or, phishing campaign in an email attachment. I mean, you would be amazed at how many people still do that, right? So put some training and some mechanisms to test your employees in front of your employees. I implore you, it's going to make us better. Now, one of the things we've done is we've opened up our training worldwide for free. So anybody can go to the training.fortinet.com and get trained on these trends we talked about, and more importantly, how to train your employees to get them smarter about cybersecurity and get them, feeling like they're participating. Now, the tools section, right? Every vendor wants to talk about their tools. And I'm no different. I'm passionate about the innovation we do. But that's not why we're here today. We're here today to talk about all the other things you need to do as an organization on top of the adopting innovative tools to mitigate these risks. You need to be thinking about it during the entire life cycle of your application development, right? We talked about this complexity on multiple fronts. Complexity of where your data in motion is going. Most of us don't even know where the data sets are that they're leveraging to be a better application, richer application for your end user. But we haven't talked about the sprawl of these very pointed products for specific use cases, right? You may have multi-vendor and firewall. You have other vendors on endpoint. You have other vendors for mail gateway. You have other vendors for web application firewalls that are protecting your APIs. All of these are giving your operations staff too many panels to be looking at, right? So how do you mitigate that? Look for a vendor that gives you Gartner put out a white paper September of last year talking about a cybersecurity mesh architecture, right? Picking a platform approach. And it will help you. We have customers that are taking advantage of that with us. Some of our competitors are also seeing success there. But I want you to look at it. I want you to take a fresh look at how you can leverage a platform to do multiple use cases to mitigate this growing security threat. Look for force amplifiers. I talked about DevOps, DevSecOps, integrating that into your continuous improvement, continuous development lifecycle, right? As your development teams are developing these applications, make sure that they're thinking about security through the entire lifecycle, right? There are vendors, we are one, that offer applications that will actually tie into your CI/CD pipeline and look for mitigations to how you're writing the code, right? Common mistakes that allow for a door into the application. So look for a vendor that can provide that for you. Others are figuring out some of these hard problems. Talk to your peers, right? The fact that you're at this show, by the way, loving to see so many faces. It's been a long time since I've actually had not a virtual audience where I was dressed like this in my home office, talking to my computer. So thank you for that. But, my hope for you today is to take a few of these nuggets that we're talking about back to your teams and start talking about how you can get better at this. So we'll go into DevSecOps view of lifecycle. And what we're really talking about here is from design to implementation to manage and optimize. You have a few decisions to make, but you should think of it cyclically, right? That's the whole continuous improvement, continuous development model, right? It's ever evolving. You're iterating constantly, right? And through those iterations, make sure you're always thinking about security and leverage the tools that exist today that allow you to, have some machine learning algorithms and some AI that help you through that process, right? I've got a minute left, so I'm going to cruise through here. I just want to get here. So we've talked about some macro trends we see in 2022. We talked about the threat landscape ever evolving. We talked about some mitigation strategies that hopefully, again, you take away an opportunity to go talk to your teams and think about how you can start the discussion and bring in the vendors, right? I think sometimes I used to be a consumer of technology, built a few networks in the area, and I always felt like we had a better view of our needs, our network, our business. And we would hold the vendors at arm's length, have the internal discussions, come up with an architecture, and then we'd invite the vendors in that we felt best fit that vision, that architecture that we had. And while that has given us some success, I got to tell you, the vendors have a lens that you don't have because they're seeing what a lot of other companies are doing. So give us a call. Eric Teece, Fortinet, give me a call. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.